afternoon. I'm hopefully being viewed currently by several of our current Summer Institute participants. I've been checking the log in the Moodle page, and it looks like several of you have logged in. Um, Glad to see that you're able to join us synchronously today for our collaborative classroom meeting. I want to start off by just explaining what this is, why I do it, and to what benefit I think comes from it. And then also making sure that I explain if in the coming weeks you cannot join us synchronously to watch the live feed, then you are welcome to view it in the evening prior to that next evening at 11:55, when it will need to be done in order for you to receive credit. We are going to be going through some of the materials that were presented in the Module 1. We also will be looking at the article that you were asked to preview prior to this meeting, and we will be taking a look at a PowerPoint that will prepare you to start writing your lesson plan that will be due no later than, I think it's 3 days is what we have down, 3 days prior to you teaching your lesson with your lead teacher during your field experience. I did receive a question, I think it was in the forum, from someone asking about the CCM lesson plan that was located on the syllabus. It was in Module 1, and I moved that down to Module 4. The reason being, even though the points were set up for Module 1, we're setting you up to be prepared to write a ULM formatted lesson plan, but you do not yet have the information necessary since you have not spoken probably with your lead teacher yet. You don't have the information necessary for you to complete that lesson plan within this module time, being that all these lessons or all of these assignments are due by tomorrow afternoon or tomorrow evening, 11:55. So instead of asking you to complete that without having all the information, I've moved that into Module 4. The due date may not align with Module 4 because some of you will be doing your solo teaching the 3rd week, and some will be doing it the 4th week. And so the due date for everyone will be flexible. I'll be checking it based on when you'll be completing your field experience. I'm going to go ahead and switch back now. Just wanted to greet you. Some of you I did have the opportunity to actually see or speak with via Google Hangout on Air for your STAR interview as you were coming into the program. Some of you I have not. And since we've only been communicating up until this point via forum in the Moodle platform, I wanted to just go ahead and come on and greet you with the real life face and voice. At this time, I'm going to go ahead and turn off my camera because we're going to be sharing the screen. I do want to give some instructions for you. Since I see several of you, I see Karen and Randall and Rachel and Megan and Meredith and Evangeline and Jennifer Beasley. Lots of people seem to be tuning in right now, looking at the Moodle page. Christy and Kirsty seem to be there now. For those of you that came in the correct way, hopefully everyone did that rather than just going to Google Hangouts on Air and looking for the presentation. If you came into the presentation via Moodle, then you'll see in your instructions that it gives you the opportunity to view the YouTube presentation, but then it also gives you the opportunity to ask questions. And so I want to talk about that for a moment. There will be some times when I'm going to be asking you to respond. I will give you an opportunity to ask questions. And from my side, I have the Q&A tab is open. So anytime questions are going to be asked, then I will go ahead and address them. Once I address your questions, I will be clicking select on your question. And so if you can't remember my answer later on, you can come back and view this, and you'll be able to see in the presentation, there'll be a sign to let you know when the question was answered, and you can go directly to that part in the presentation. I am going to go ahead and answer a question now from Rachel. It says approximately how long will this meeting last? They're always scheduled for 1 hour. I try to really keep it tightly fit within there, even though I really like to answer questions. Going back to the whole purpose for having this, the reason we do this is because with having something completely online prior to your field experience, oftentimes there are some misunderstandings or things are misconstrued via text. I like to speak to all learning styles, which is why we're using audio and video today. And we are having an opportunity to be on at the same time rather than having to wait time for posting something in a forum and waiting for a response. The whole purpose for this is, as I said, to go back and review some of the things that were presented in Module 1, make sure we clear up any misunderstandings and have a little deeper discussion. And by the end of this module, we will be laying the groundwork for you to write your lesson plan and talking about how all of the material in Module 1 is going to help you to get to that point. Let's go ahead, and I'm going to start sharing my screen now. We're going to go ahead and take a look at some of the forums that have been completed. I'm going to change my view here. All right, let's go ahead and share my screen. All right, we're going to take a look, and I think I want to move to a different one here. The first question we asked was about science versus art, so let's take a look at one of those first. Oh, it hasn't changed yet. I'm my own technician once again, so I'll see when we actually have the opportunity to see that lag catch up. We're going to stop presenting until I can get to the one I want. That's not the one I want either. I wanted to take a moment and just share with you some of the responses from the forum so that we could talk a little bit about the reasons for these assignments, what I was hoping that you would gain from them for us to kind of clarify some understanding as we went through. And then also, lastly, for you to be able to give me some responses. Having some technical issues here. Can't seem to figure out why I can't get that I particularly want. Ah, I see. All right, finally, we are able to get to what I want to show you. And I'm going to zoom in for you so that we can see one of the responses from the forum. Another thing I want to remind you about, let's see if this is getting bigger for you. Going to take a few seconds. I want to remind you on how to make comments, ask questions. Of course, when you go into the Moodle, if you'll scroll down past that YouTube presentation, and then you'll look where there's a link. It takes you to the Google Plus event page. There you can actually ask a question. I see Rachel has figured that out already. The other thing is that there will be times where I'm going to ask you to weigh in. I'm going to ask a question that's going to be a closed-ended question, and I'll ask you to either agree or disagree. And when I do that, you have the capability to go in, because I set the presentation up this way, where you can actually select thumbs up or thumbs down. Let me give you some instructions on being able to do that. Move this around just a little bit. Okay, as a viewer, um, if you're watching this in the YouTube, then you will have the opportunity when you look at the bottom of the video window, you can either click thumbs up or thumbs down. And this, when you do that, you'll hear applause. That doesn't mean, it's not the same as watching a video where you can either like or dislike it. The thumbs up or thumbs down will timestamp, so it'll actually show us what you agreed with and didn't agree with. And I'm going to be able to go back and use that so that I can see, what things you agreed with overall and did not agree with, so I can kind of get a temperature gauge for everyone who's currently viewing the video. So I wanted to just go ahead and take a look at one of the first things that you were asked to do in Module 1, which was to respond to the prompt that asked you to think about one of your favorite teachers, or I shouldn't use the word favorite, one of the most effective teachers that you had. We're going to take a look at that as well. I want to look at the prompt. One of the most effective educators that you had, and then to tell why you thought they were effective, and then to go ahead and decide whether or not you thought that teaching was an art or a science. This is one of the responses that I received, and I'm going to tell you why I selected a couple of these responses. I wanted to get at the meat of what I hope that you walked away from after you watched the presentations on science versus art and read the article, looked at some of the vocabulary, and had a chance to look at some of your colleagues' responses. I wanted to pull out two, and this first one is Randall Tittle. Says, I've had a number of wonderful teachers throughout my life, but the teacher that made the strongest impact on me was my 12th grade English teacher, Mrs. Mitzi Quinn. Her classroom was like nothing else I'd ever experienced. She had a set of classroom procedures that each and every student followed without question. One of her biggest strengths was her ability to connect to her students personally and to create lesson plans that accommodated all of our individual interests. We did multiple projects in her class throughout the year that incorporated modern technology and group work that kept us all interested and engaged. She also encouraged us to work together as a class and to help one another in areas that we might be struggling in. It is because of Mrs. Quinn that I believe teaching is a blend of science and art. She took her vast array of knowledge and crafted it in the most unique and entertaining methods of instruction, and in doing so, earned the respect and love of all her students. So from that, I wanted us to kind of cull, what do we think from Randall's response? Which parts of his description of Mrs. Quinn do we think fit science? And for that, I'm going to ask you to go to the question and answer. Since we don't have the ability to chat in this forum, you're not actually participants, but viewers. If you could go to the forum and just go ahead for me and give a couple of answers, examples of what do you think was shared that's an example of the science of teaching. I know there's a lag, so I'm going to wait for just a few moments. All right, I'm going to also check my Google Plus page to make sure you're not making comments there. All right, I know we've got some live viewers, but I am not receiving any comments in the Q&A section. We're going to try one other method. I would like for you to give me the thumbs up, thumbs down if you're viewing in Google Plus. If you're viewing it in the Google Plus where you can ask questions, you also can put in thumbs up or thumbs down. And I'll ask you just to use a thumbs up, thumbs down. If I share with you one of the components of our classroom, we're going to thumbs up if we think this is an example of science. She encouraged us to work together as a class and to help one another in the areas that we might be struggling in. Let's see. Okay, Alyssa, the procedures that everyone followed flawlessly. Thank you so much, Alyssa. I did find your comment on the Google Plus page. You typed that in as a comment, so I did see that. Alyssa says that they followed the procedures flawlessly. I can't see our thumbs up, thumbs down, so I'm gonna open up here and see if I'm getting that response from you all. Not sure that everybody's figured out what to do. Oh, okay. I do have some. I've got both. I've got thumbs up and thumbs down here. So let's just kind of discuss that. Most of them are thumbs up. That is an example of science. The fact that she had procedures that had been taught, rehearsed, and implemented in her classroom. She taught, rehearsed, and implemented them. And I venture to say that she probably also then tested the children on that on several times to make sure that they hadn't forgotten it, and rewarded them for following the procedures. Because those procedures were in order and everyone followed them, that is an example of science. Let's see if we have any others. Let's see if we have any other responses here. Not. Okay, let's move on. I want to talk about some things that are examples of art. I put this one out there before I saw Alyssa's response, and Alyssa did go ahead and identify something that was an example of science. The things here that Randall shares that show us that that Ms. Quinn had a scientific approach to her methodology or to her practice is that she had the procedures in place that the students followed, which meant they knew the procedures. She also incorporated technology and group work. I want to go down to crafting unique and entertaining methods of instruction. Those would all be examples of science. Then when we talk about the artistic part, we're talking about the more social emotional types of things, the development of relationships, the ability to have a good rapport, knowing your students so that you know how you might have to diversify or differentiate your strategies so that each student can get the material. One of the biggest things I wanted you to walk away from was this. It is important that a teacher feels that they are doing a particular job for a reason, that it's something that has a greater impact than just them receiving a paycheck at the end of the month. It is important that you realize your responsibility as an educator to those students on a social and emotional level. But it is also important that we realize that just caring about and loving children and wanting to get along with them or trying to make sure that their experience is pleasant is not enough to make us an effective educator. It is also important that we know our content, that we are continuously improving and honing our craft, that we realize that there is a scientific methodology to improvement, and that we have got to learn the pedagogy, which are the principles of learning and teaching, to make sure that we're effective for all students. Just because you know math or science does not make you a good math or science teacher. And so it's the pedagogy or the principles of learning and teaching that brings a scientific aspect to it. I wanted to take a look at another one. This was submitted by Jennifer Beasley, and she also pointed out some. I'm looking at my time. I like to have dialogue, conversation, but unfortunately, we've got some things that are going to stifle us as far as communication, being that this is mostly one-sided. Um, Looking at what Jennifer said when she talked about Miss Bradley, she pulled out something from each side, the science versus the art. She said when she talked about the art that she realized that teaching is something that can be evaluated and measured. It's something we can conduct research on to see what are the better methods for teaching, and then what those results will yield for the student as far as uh, um, their learning achievement. She also said that it's an art because they've got to be creative in planning their lessons. They've got to have ingenuity, creativity in order for them to be productive and or effective. All of that is very true. As teachers, one thing that we have to remember is that we have to pull from both sides of the grain when we're presenting information to students. That's something I think that Dr. Wong got across very nicely when he talked about preparing your classroom for success, and we're going to get into that next. The next form that I asked you to respond to after the science versus art was the forum on uh, effective teaching. So we're going to take a look at that one. I'm sorry, I said effective teaching. I meant, yeah, we're going to talk about that one before we go to reflective teaching. So let's take a look here. Kimberly had this to say in the effective teaching forum. After watching Dr. Wong's presentations, she felt that what she wanted to own was to commit to setting her students up for success by outlining what it is they are to learn, to start the unit and the week with criteria, let them know how they'll be assessed or tested, to make sure that they could see as well as she could see if they mastered the concepts and how they could go back and correct and reassess. So it's really important. She included the fact that assessment and evaluation is not just from teacher to student, but the student should be given the opportunity for self-evaluation and reflection and being able to assess their progress. She liked the way that he said to set up the criteria and use it as a study guide, knowing that it would not only help the students, but help the teacher to stay focused on what she's teaching. As a person that taught for 1 year without being in the program and going through this process of learning that pedagogy, she recognized that she struggled with making sure that the students were learning the most important things. And you know, that is important as teachers. If we know what's most important before we deliver instruction, then we can better guarantee that the students will get the most important things, and that we won't get caught up on the periphery and talking about things that are really not necessary for mastery. And we've spent 60% of our time talking about those things because the students seem to understand them better, and we, you know, feel really gratified that we can get through those parts of the lesson. But then 60% of the assessment is on these other things that we didn't spend much time on. So one thing that I like that Kimberly brought out is that as an instructor, as a teacher, when we think of that scientific approach to teaching, is that we have to have a roadmap. It's just like the roadmap that was put in your Summer Institute. We have to have a roadmap for instruction for the students and for ourselves. And that roadmap should not be kept secret from the students. They should know where they're going. They should know how to judge whether or not they've been successful. If they know particular things, if they're able to do particular things, then they should know that if I'm able to do these things and demonstrate this knowledge, I can be successful on this unit. I can be successful on the unit assessment. I can be successful in this class. That way they can monitor their own learning. They can figure out when they're having trouble. when they're not actually meeting the mark or your expectation, and they can come to you and say specifically, instead of "I don't understand" or "I don't get it," they can say, "I don't know how to do A and B," because they know that's what's expected of them at the end of the lesson. Now moving on to reflective teaching. And then at the end of this, we're going to talk about why all of this was important to have in Module 1, because I do recognize it was a lot. I know that that was quite a bit for you guys to kind of make your way through, and you still maybe haven't finished everything. But I want to explain to you the importance of everything that was in Module 1. And just in case there's something perhaps that you have, let's see why we're not back on my page. Not sharing. Okay, there's just a slight delay, so I'm going to wait till you can see Courtney's post and make sure it gets a little bigger for you. There's a method to the madness and methodology, so hopefully I'm able to demonstrate and model what I'm asking you to do as teachers. In response to the reflective teaching form, when you were asked to either define reflective teaching, tell what it meant to you, or tell what you thought was the most important thing about reflective teaching, Courtney says, "I define reflective practice as continually observing your own teaching and the outcomes that it produces, and using what you observe to better yourself and the way that you are teaching. You are constantly looking back at your actions in order to do them better the next time." So I think there are a few important things, and one of the main reasons I chose to share this is that when she talked about reflective teaching, she used two important words. And since I'm not sure, I have not been seeing very many questions, I'm not seeing a lot of responses here on the Google Plus page. I don't want to keep asking questions that you're not going to be able to respond to. So I'm going to move forward. And not just wait and ask for a response. But the two words, if I were to ask a question, I would ask you, what two words do you think stood out to me, and I think are the two most important words in Courtney's response. But I'll go ahead and tell you what they are. The two most important words are continually and constantly, because reflective teaching is an ongoing process. It's an ongoing process so that you can continually advance and refine your teaching practices, because from year to year, you're going to have a new group of students. From year to year, you will have accumulated more knowledge, more information, more resources, and so your teaching should never get stagnant, but should always grow. The other thing I want to pull out that she shared that I think is really important to note is that she said that you're not just observing your teaching, but you're observing the outcomes from your action. And that is a really important part of reflective teaching. It's not just watch me and see what happened. You need to try to draw correlations between what you said and did and then the student's achievement, or the student's responses on an assessment, or when you do an exit ticket, how well students did. And that's what makes it a science. If you're able to look and see, on this particular day, I did most of the talking, and I presented a PowerPoint, and I asked students to write notes. And when we took a practice quiz on the vocabulary, they didn't do as well. But the next time when I utilized, let's just say Evernote, and I went and took pictures of different things, and I presented those pictures, and I asked each groups of students to get into groups and to define the picture or find the vocabulary word that goes with the picture. If you get better results from that practice, that's what reflective teaching is. It's to tell you what you should continue doing and perhaps what you might need to change. Let's go on. We're going to run out of time, so we're going to quickly get on to this next one. This needs to move. And I wanted to share the last but not least, Nicholas, his response. Nicholas said, "For me, the most important feature of reflective practice is being my first and worst critic. In my opinion, to effectively alter my teaching craft moving forward, I have to be willing to work toward removal of bias from my reflective process. In order to evolve, I want to develop a self-reflective process that questions everything while entertaining different approaches to not only my goal, but my students' academic goals. So he recognizes the fact that he as a teacher has a goal. He has an expectation or expectations for his students, but he also wants the students to have their own expectations as they're able to reflect on their own work and see whether or not they are meeting the criteria that you've provided for them. The other thing I really like about this is that Nicholas realizes that we can be biased. When you are doing self-reflection, it's different from outside assessment. So self-reflection really should be guided. You should have some questions. What should you be looking at and looking for? And that's something that we're going to talk about when we talk about the evaluation tool that will be used for you. You can use that very same evaluation tool to ask yourself those same questions and then be more specific, looking at your learning outcomes for your students and what expectations you have for that class or for that unit. And then those will help you to determine, have you spent the majority of your time on those parts of the material that you expect students to master. One of the great ways to do that is using videos of practice. We will talk about that the closer we get to your field experience. I want to go ahead, and we're moving quickly because I'm hoping at some point in time you will be able to, at some point in time, if you do have questions, we'll be able to get to those, and I'll have a Q&A last few minutes. We only have about 29 minutes left, so we're halfway through the process. Unfortunately, oh, I do have some questions. Christy, great, Christy, so I can see that you're back again, and I see that you are on someone else's. That's quite all right. As long as you logged in through Moodle, you'll still get credit. And Rachel, I can see your question. So where you posted in the Q&A on Google Plus event page, that is where you will have your questions. So if you have questions, or hopefully you'll be able to just use this to respond back to me when I ask a question, so that we can have a measure of dialogue, since I can't hear you or see your faces. That will be helpful. I want to, just an aside, we are able to use Google Hangouts so that everyone can be seen and heard, but there is a cap of 10 people. And to keep from having to do several of these meetings, I decided to do it in this format, so it's more of a broadcasting. I see we only have 8 or 9 viewers now. And as time goes on, I might put out invitations, and the first 10 people can then get online and can be seen and heard and can ask questions, and everyone else will have to view it. I will look at doing that. Rachel talked about the reflective teaching that can be biased. Thank you. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and respond to Rachel's question. She says, you are stating that reflective teaching can be biased. Are you stating that it's okay to be biased, or should we try to avoid this? Thank you for asking for clarification. Rachel, what I'm saying is that you should try to avoid your own particular biases. I will tell you one thing that is helpful, and I mentioned it. Having a video is a very effective reflective tool, because then you can't argue with yourself, yes, I did, or yes, I didn't. What happens in most cases is just like when you write something down and then you read it back out loud to a group, you read what you intended to write. You don't necessarily read the words on the page. The same thing is the case, and I'm going to go ahead and go to our next part of our folder. The same thing is the case when we reflect on our teaching without having a non-biased tool there presenting what actually took place in the class. If you'd ask your students, they would tell you that different things happened in your class than what you remember, because you're seeing it from your perspective. To keep us from being biased, oftentimes the video allows us to see what we actually said, not what we intended to say, or what we planned on doing. It shows us what we actually did and what the students did in response. And so that is really the way to get a different perspective, because watching a video play out before you, you can't argue with it. It's not based on what you put in your plans. It's based on what actually happened. So I'm telling you that we need to distance ourselves from those personal biases, and that's the best way to do it. It's good to have maybe peer assessments or peer reviews, but that self-assessment, you know what you intended to do, and then you get a chance to sit and look at that video and say, what did you really do? And then you can tell yourself, I didn't realize I had that habit. I didn't realize I only call on the people who raise their hands. I didn't realize there's a student at the back of the room I did not interact with all day. Those things keep you from being biased. So good question. We should attempt to reduce biases when we're trying to be reflective in our teaching practice. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and take a look. You were asked to preview this article prior to today, and the reason being is that I wanted to tie Module 1 all together. Of course, we looked at science, teaching being a science versus an art, and looking at your responses, the lion's share of you agreed that teaching has to be both a science and an art, because we do bring in those social, emotional aspects. We do customize lessons for students based on our specific, particular knowledge of each student's strengths and weaknesses, things that are going on with them. But we do have to use scientific practice. We have to use a scientific methodology to try to make sure that we are able to meet our goals, as well as helping the students to meet their learning goals. We listened to Dr. Wong, who talked about teaching for mastery. He also talked about what makes an effective teacher. He talked about setting up procedures and also having classroom transitions. In our reading, Dr. Wong talked about the fact that effective teachers have three characteristics. They have good classroom management, they teach lessons for mastery, and they have positive expectations for their students. All of that is a part of being a reflective educator, and an educator who's effective, because you know how to design effective lessons. So we're going to take a look at this research on instructional outcomes. Dr. Wong talked about having objectives for units of study, sharing those objectives with your students, telling them where they can find the answers to those objectives, where the material was coming from, to help them to understand and to know those things they were going to be held accountable for, utilizing that as a study guide, and then utilizing that yourself as you created your own test. We're going to delve a little deeper in the work of Dr. Danielson and what she shared as far as setting instructional outcomes. So now we know we need to set those outcomes. We need to share them with our students. But I also wanted to share with you what are some characteristics of good instructional outcomes. If you're going to create good instructional outcomes so that you know you have effective planning for effective instructional delivery, then we need to look at the steps for creating those. First of all, you've got to determine what the outcomes are. You've got to decide what's going to be the evidence that the students have accomplished these outcomes. You've got to identify what accommodations might be necessary for different students. That brings in the art part. You've got to make sure you clearly communicate these outcomes to the students. Dr. Wong emphasizes that. The students have to know what they will be held accountable for and what your expectations are, so they can have their own expectations. And then you've got to track the students' progress toward achieving those outcomes. So basically what this is telling us is that you have to know what the learning outcome should be for the students before you teach any lesson. You don't just teach it because it comes next in the chapter. Okay, that's the main thing we want to realize about creating lesson plans. Lesson plans are all based on what the learning should be, and then we develop a plan to help the student get there. I'm going to check again to see um, if we have any comments. And as I said before, I am being my own technician, so I'm going back and forth from one computer to the other. If I miss a comment, I see we've got some thumbs ups and thumbs downs, and I just appreciate that. If the content is something that you think is good, or you have a question about it, you can put the thumbs down and I can go back and look, and that might be something we still need to get clarified. I don't see any other questions, so we're going to move forward. Just wanted to kind of cover this. We're going to work on a way for this to be more, it is synchronous that we're all here, but it is not very interactive so that we can have a conversation. I knew that that was one downfall of utilizing this platform. When we look at creating instructional outcomes, it's important that we consider our audience, that we state the behavior that we expect the student to exemplify, that we include the conditions under which the learning will occur, and to define how well they'll perform that. This is based on Mager's research on how to create an effective instructional outcome. And I'm just hitting some high points here for us. This sets us up for the next presentation that I want to share with you, and I will make this presentation available for you in the same on the same web page where you're able to get to this presentation. I will make this available for you so that you can go back and look at it at your leisure, but I'm going to put it in presentation mode right now. Okay. I'm going to make this a little smaller because it looks like it's not. Well, let's see if your screen catches up with mine. I see you all aren't able to see it just yet. As you get here, we're going to talk about writing learning objectives. And based on that research by Mager, we are going to look at the A, B, C's, and D's of writing good lesson objectives. Because we want to make sure we put this in terms that not only the student knows what's expected of them, but they know at what level they should be able to exemplify these characteristics or show this understanding before they consider that they've mastered that concept. It's also important for us to be able to determine to what level we're expecting them to perform for mastery. So when we do our assessment, we're giving them fair assessment items, and then we're also doing a fair job of grading. Okay. And I'm not going to put this in, let's see, I think I'm going to switch from putting this in present mode, and I'm actually just going to present it this way because it's going to have to go through being converted to go into Google, and I'm not sure we're going to get all of our parts on here. Okay, I see it's moving down for me. This is a presentation we've been using for years. It was developed by our own Dr. Clark, who's now the director over graduate school when he was an assistant professor. And I think it does the very best job of summing up Mager's work and helping new teachers figure out what needs to be involved in a correct objective. So these are the, and it says, these are the 4 components for every objective, A, B, C, D. Remember that. Audience. Who is the target of this objective? B, behavior. What behavior is expected from the learner to show that he or she has learned the material? Too many times we've seen objectives that say this, the students will understand, the students will know, the students will learn. If you remember, Dr. Wong said in this presentation, we should have a series of action verbs that we use for our behaviors. If there's not an action verb in your learning objective, it's not a learning objective, because you have to have the students do something that is observable so that you can tell and measure to what extent they understand the material. If you cannot observe it or measure it, then it's not an objective. The student won't be able to tell whether or not they have achieved the objective, and neither will you. because a student, I could say, did you learn it? And they could all say yes, but I'm not able to measure that, nor can I observe it. So it's not a real objective. It won't help to guide their learning, and it won't help me to assess whether or not they've learned, and I need to go back and reteach, or if I can move on because they've mastered it. Okay, conditions. Under which conditions will the learner be expected to demonstrate his or her knowledge? And then to what degree? This is when we really get into mastery. There will be some concepts and skills that will be included in a unit that you find will be repeated over and over again in your grade. And at this point, the student is not expected to master it, but it's a stepping stone that they need to be introduced to so that they can do the next thing. So it's important that you know which ones should be mastered. And in your district, when they share with you your curriculum, you'll be able to see which ones should be mastered at which times. So those for mastery should be at an 80% or above, okay? If you're expecting the students to master this learning or this particular concept, it should be 80% or above. That's the degree. Let's look at some examples. I want to make sure we have time to go through here. This is another way to look at it. Audience is for whom you are writing the objective. The behavior is what must the learner perform. Remember, you've got to be able to see it and measure it. Now you just caught up with me. I don't think that you're there yet. Here we go. Okay. What must the learner perform? And then how will it be performed? Under what conditions? And lastly, the degree, the criterion, or the standard, how well must it be performed? Okay, so where we have here degree, you could also put the standard from the state assessment standards. You could put the criterion, or you could put the degree. Okay, let's move on. Now here it makes us clear who the audience is. The audience is whoever is participating in the learning activities, or whoever is participating in the lesson. So generally we use the abbreviation TLW or TSW. The student will or the learner will. This states who the audience is. Next, let's take a look at B for behavior. We've got to describe the performance by the learner. It can't be what you're going to do. You can't say, I will review chapter 5. That is not a learning objective because you're not the learner, and that may be your teaching objective, but that's not the learner objective. You may review chapter 5, but what do you expect the student to be able to know and be able to do after you review chapter 5? So it's got to be in terms of the learner. It's got to be observable and measurable. And it's got to be visible or audible or produce a tangible product that can be assessed. Because if we put the student will know how to count to 10, that's not a learning objective. You have to ask yourself, how will I know they know how to count to 10? And that's going to lead you to the real writing of the objective. Okay, here are a couple examples. We said we needed to use action verbs. So when we look at the behavior, here are a few action verbs that list the behavior that is expected from the learner. Write an essay to present conclusions orally and graphically. Sing a ballad. Compose a written response. Compute long division problems. Create a graphic organizer. Organize a scientific experience. So now you'll see that each of these behaviors is led off by an action verb, something that can be seen, heard, or otherwise observed, and that can be measured. Looks like we've got quite a bit of lag. I'm gonna hold on here. Okay, should be able to move on. Now onto our condition. We're almost to our time, so we're going to go do our questions and answers in just a moment. And I'm going to explain to you how we're going to build on this for our collaborative classroom meeting for modules 2 and 3. The condition is the circumstance that will have significant impact on the learner's ability to perform the behavior. In short, a student wouldn't be able to would not be able to create an essay without particular conditions being present. They will either need to create the essay when they're given a prompt. They'll create the essay after they've read a story. They will create an essay when given specific directions. It's just, it wouldn't be vague. You wouldn't just go to the student and say, write an essay. We want to know under what conditions would they be asked to perform the behavior. It's also the situation or the scenario. In what scenario would the student be expected to do this? We've got some examples coming up that may make sure that this is a whole lot easier for you. So let's go on. Here's some examples. Given pencil and paper, the student will compute a 3-step algebraic computation. Given access to the internet. Of course, we wouldn't expect the student to create a multimedia presentation if they didn't have access to the internet. Given pond water and a microscope, would they have to look for single-celled organisms? So these are the conditions. I want to give, again, I gave some that I think are maybe a little closer to home. Students would not be able to write a narrative response if they're not given something to respond to. So they first have to be given a short story or a poem or some type of a work that they could respond to. So that's when you determine the conditions. What will you do to prepare them to perform? It's kind of the setup. And then to the degree. This is going to help you and the student determine whether or not they've been successful. To what degree are you expecting them to complete this task or behavior? What level are you expecting them to reach? We can use the categories of accuracy, 80% accuracy, 80% or better, speed, within 2 minutes, if it's a timed test or multiplication tables, or quality. And in that case with quality, we may give them a rubric and ask them, expect that they will get at least 8 points on a 10-point rubric. Here's some examples. When looking at accuracy, it could be with 90% accuracy, speed in less than 2 minutes, or quality that include a statement of behavior, condition, and criteria for each of 6 levels of Bloom's taxonomy. So those are things that are expected to be included. All right, so when we put it all together, what do we have? These are examples of correct learning objectives that can not only be written by the teacher, but shared with the students so that the students can know when they have met the objective, or when they have reached mastery, or when they have performed to your expectation. The first, compute two, the learner will tells us the audience. Compute two-column addition requiring, I'm sorry, two-column addition problems requiring regrouping. That's the behavior. Condition, given a worksheet with 25 problems and degree with 95% accuracy. And you can look at those other examples for yourself. Now we're going to use the thumbs up, thumbs down for a moment. I'm going to give you some examples of some objectives, and you are going to give me a thumbs up, thumbs down to tell whether or not they are being used correctly. I'm sorry, if they're constructed correctly. Let me make sure I make that clear. Okay, 3 last things to look at, what they've got to include. These are just 3 more reminders. The objectives have to be based on something. That's the main thing to remember. Number 2, they should be consistent with your course goals, which means they should be based on the standards that those students are supposed to be mastering at that level. Standards, GLEs, whatever you all are calling them. They can't just be something that you decided on. They've got to identify learning outcomes, and they've got to be observable and measurable. All right, let's take a look then. Here's some examples. Okay, we've got a little lag again. Here we are. I'm going to see if there's a way we can. I just want to look at just one. Let's look at the first one. The learner will gather appropriate materials to work with his group partner. I want you to give me a thumbs up if you think that that meets the criteria, and a thumbs down if it does not. Okay. I have one person that voted thumbs up. Got some more votes coming. Some of us are riding the fence. Again, the learner will gather appropriate materials to work with his group partner. I'm gonna wait for a couple more seconds to see if we get any more responses. Let's see what these are. Okay. All right. Got a couple down. Waiting to see what we've got here. Okay. The answer is this is incorrect. It's not constructed correctly. We have the learner will. We know who our audience is. Where is the behavior? I know we have an action verb here, gather, but this here is an activity. Even though we have an action verb, even though we have an action verb, it is not describing a learning goal. Let's get back to where we were. Not describing a learning goal there, guys. It does have an action verb. Gather is an action verb, but it's not an action verb that describes a learning goal. They are not demonstrating understanding of anything. This does not show us what they know or are able to do. This is not an acceptable objective. I want to take a look. We're almost out of time, so we're just going to look at maybe one more. Let's see, maybe two more. Okay, they're all so good. They're all so good. I'm going to display them all, and then we're going to go over the answers because we're short on time. I really, really, really wish we could get some people to type um, in the Q&A and respond so I could get a temperature check of the room. However, what we're going to do is this. I'll just have you take a few minutes to look at it. Make sure that you're able to read all of them. Then I'm going to give you the results, whether or not they meet the criteria for a correctly constructed learning objective. Okay, I think we should have had enough time now to read them all. So I'm going to go ahead and give you the results. And then what I'm going to do is see if we have anyone that has questions. If you say, wait, I don't agree with that answer, then that will give you a chance to go ahead and ask any questions that you might have in the Q&A forum. I'll make this a little smaller. If anyone sees one that you disagree with, please post in the Q&A so that we can talk about why it is or is not correct. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions about these particular ones. I hope that means that there are no misconceptions. We're going to go ahead and close up this presentation so that we can take, we're about 4 minutes past 5. And I want to go ahead and take some questions about the Summer Institute in general, anything that you have questions about. I do want to say there was a lot of material presented. One of the reasons being that there's a lot to try to get across, especially for novice teachers prior to August, to get you to the point where you at least have all the tools necessary and background knowledge to get a profitable start to your first year and have the best experience possible under the circumstances. Also, in order to give you enough background information to be prepared to write a lesson plan and be prepared to be assessed and evaluated by a supervisor, all of this background was necessary. I will be posting some more things in forums online, just as far as clarifying, but I was hoping to clarify some things in this format. Not seeing any questions in the Q&A. I'm not sure. I will have to check in Moodle to see if that meant because you were having a hard time getting here. I know Rachel made it, and so did Christy Rawls. So I know it's accessible, but I'm not getting responses back. We will have clearer information on how we can make this more collaborative and make it more integrated moving forward. Even though we have a very large class, we'll look at some other ways that we'll be able to be more collaborative, because that is the whole reason for this space and for your participation in it, to clarify some things, to give some further instruction in a different format so that it's not always you looking at presentations and videos and things on your own without getting any feedback. It was good to have you join us. I have waited already 6 minutes past 5 and we're still not showing any questions. So we're going to go ahead and close the broadcast for today. As I put in the email, I'm sorry, not in the email, but in Moodle, I have already been checking the log. I will be checking the log to see who viewed the entire presentation, to give credit for that. And then I also will be adding this presentation to that web page that has the playback for the YouTube. So you'll be able to get to this presentation even though it will no longer be live. All right, thanks for joining those of you who were on, and have a good evening.